We're coming up on 8 months of doing these daily devotionals. We met for church the second week of March on a Sunday morning. By Tuesday, things were starting to get obviously very concerning around the world regarding the pandemic. By Wednesday night, we had made the decision to shut down gathering together in corporate gatherings, at least for the time being. Within a few days, we decided to go online with these daily devotionals to help supplement, hopefully to encourage the people of Doorway, and now as it's turned out, people around the world is watching our devotionals, both in Africa and Europe and around the world. And we did this to hopefully encourage you throughout these times of trouble. Now, we were fortunate enough back in May at Doorway to start gathering again on Sunday mornings for corporate worship, and we've been able to continue broadcasting our services live from there. And that ministry has continued to grow, and we encourage you to share links to those videos with your friends wherever they might be, not so that we might grow and become famous, but so that we might continue to bless others as God has blessed us. But through it all, it's always been this question of where do we go in times of trouble? This morning, as we look at Psalm number 49, we're looking at a song about times of trouble. In fact, as I look at Psalm 49 in the ESV, the label of the song, the title, and remember these are just made up by the editors, they're from the original Hebrew text. But the editors have called this song, "Why Should I Fear in Times of Trouble?" And so it's perfectly appropriate for this year, isn't it? 2020. It's perfectly appropriate for the fact that in a few days after this video goes live, we'll vote in the United States for the President of the United States. No matter which way it goes, whichever candidate wins, the other side's going to be sorely disappointed. There's going to be frustration and anger and violence probably over how the election goes. We shouldn't respond that way, but unfortunately that's the world we now live in 2020. But why should I fear in times of trouble? And so let's read Psalm number 49, and let's look at the psalmist's concerns for his day and age, and what he proposes ought to be our answer to that question. Psalm 49, verse 1. Hear this, all peoples. Give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor together. My mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. Why should I fear in times of trouble when the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me, those who trust in their wealth and boast of their abundance of their riches? Truly, no man can ransom another or give to God the price of his life, for the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice that he should live on forever and never see the pit. For he sees that even when the wise die, the fool and the stupid alike must perish and leave their wealth to others. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they called lands by their own names. Man in his pomp will not remain. He is like beasts that perish. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence, yet after them people approve of their boasts. Like sheep they are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol, with no place to dwell. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. Be not afraid when a rich man becomes rich, or when a man becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases. For when he dies, he will carry nothing away. His glory will not go down after him. For though, while he lives, he counts himself blessed, and though you get praise when you do well for yourself, his soul will go to the generation of his fathers, who will never again see light. Man in his pomp, yet without understanding, is like the beasts that perish. This is a difficult psalm. It falls under what is often labeled as wisdom literature. Wisdom like Job. Wisdom like the Proverbs. In fact, the author mentions Proverbs here. Wisdom literature, that center section of our Bibles, the section of the Old Testament from Job through the Song of Songs. Now, wisdom here is not about gaining more knowledge simply for the sake of gaining knowledge. Wisdom here is what you do with the knowledge, right? You know people who are head smart but practically useless, the people who don't have any common sense. That's what wisdom does. Wisdom says, here's the information, and then we're able to use it wisely. And so the author is thinking through difficult matters and asking, what do I do with this? How do I respond in times of trouble? How do I make sense of the fact that here I am trying to be pious and godly, trying to live a good Christian life in 2020, and I'm struggling? Yet I look all around me and people who don't go to church, people who are pagan, people who are atheistic, people who hate what I represent, they're doing well. They have their health. They're gaining wealth. How do I make sense of that? And then what do I do with it after I come to a conclusion? That's this particular psalm in a nutshell. But there's some wonderful little nuggets of wisdom interwoven throughout it. So let's go through it real quickly and let's think about what it is the author has to say to us. Hear this, all peoples. Give ear, all inhabitants of the earth, both low and high, rich and poor together. The author's point is, what he's about to say is not just for the Jewish people. It's not just for people of God. It's for all people. What is said here is true of everybody who's ever taken a breath on this planet. Listen up, he says. Pay attention. My mouth, verse 3, shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart, as I ponder these things, shall be understanding. And so I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to process it. I'm going to respond. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of a lyre. So he's pondering, he's thinking, developing his thoughts. Here's what he's trying to answer. Why should I fear in times of trouble? And the question goes on all the way down through verse 6. Particularly if you look at verse 6, part of what it struggles is that those who are not godly seem to have more, and they seem to be accumulating wealth while he's struggling. If we're all honest, many of us do that. We're afraid to say it out loud because we're afraid to come across as jealous or envious. We're afraid to become greedy over these things. But it's human nature to compare ourselves to others, to see what they're doing, to see how they're doing. And it's nature in our sinful condition, perhaps, to wonder why them and not me. So the answer comes further in the song. It says, verse 7, truly no man can ransom another, or even give to God the price of his own life. Doesn't matter how much wealth you have, you can't buy your eternal freedom. You can't pay the debt of your sin. Because we have sinned against an infinitely good God, the cost of our debt is infinite. So no matter how rich your neighbor seems to be, he's in the same condition you are, apart from God's mercy and grace. For the ransom of their life is costly, he says, and they can never suffice, that he should live on forever and not see the pit. None of us can pay the price. We're all going down into the pit without God's grace. For he sees that even wise die. So even those that we sometimes find ourselves jealous of, they're going to die as well, the fool and the stupid alike, and leave their wealth to others. All the rest of this is just temporary, he says. Instead, he goes on, verse 11, their graves are their homes forever. Think about that. They're going to be stuck in their tomb forever and ever. Their dwelling place to all generations. After this life, this next life goes on for eternity. Though they called the lands by their own names, didn't matter how rich they are, their common destiny is the grave, is death. It's the punishment for sin. Man in his pomp, he says, verse 12, won't remain. He's like the animals, the beasts that will perish. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence. Yet after them, people approve of their boasts. Yeah, they're foolish in their confidence. I'm going to live forever and make a difference. And people pat them on the back for it. But he says in verse 14, they're like sheep appointed for Sheol. Death. In fact, he goes on in verse 14. It's an incredibly powerful word picture. Death, he says, will be their shepherd. See, those who follow God, following through the valley of the shadow of death. For those who are not of the redeemed, death itself is their shepherd. And the upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in the Sheol with no place to dwell. But here comes our hope, verse 15. Not in our wealth, not in our power, not our position or privilege, but God. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol. God will pay the debt. God will satisfy our sin debt. He will receive me. See, we can't pay the debt. That's why we know from the New Testament, God the Son had to become God with us, Emmanuel. He had to become the God-man so that the one who is infinitely good and infinitely worthy could die on the cross and pay our infinite debt to God's righteousness. Be not afraid. Don't worry about the other guy. Verse 16 says, when he becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases. Because when he dies, verse 17, he takes nothing with him. His glory will not go down after him. So here's his point. Don't miss this as he wraps it up. For though while he lives, he counts himself blessed, and though you get praise when you do well for yourself, even when we have a good day, people pat us back, don't put any stock in that. His soul will go to the generations of his fathers. He'll be gathered to his fathers, buried in the same tomb, in Sheol with them forever, where you will never see light again, he says in verse 19. Man in his pomp, yet without understanding, is like beasts that perish. Now, for those who are rich and are counting on their wealth to rescue them, this is not a very encouraging psalm. But for those who trust in God, we have the hope that God will pay our ransom, that God will redeem us from death, and that this psalm here in the middle of the Old Testament is talking about life after death. It's talking about resurrection, a concept hinted at it in places in the Old Testament, but not fully understood until Christ himself walked out of the tomb that Sunday morning. The apostles didn't understand it when they predicted it, and I imagine the psalmist's audience didn't fully fathom it. They probably rejoiced in the fact that God will solve their problem, and that their real problem is not the neighbor's wealth, but their lack of standing before God on their own, but God who will pay our debt. This morning, as we think about the troubles of 2020, don't focus on the good times of others. Don't dwell on the good times of your past. Lean upon God and dwell with him forever.